I love Kid Icarus Uprising. It's my favorite game of all time. I love the dialogue, the story, the music, the gameplay, and yes, even the controls. In my opinion, the controls are some of the tightest shooter controls out there. So naturally, I'm upset that Nintendo hasn't made a sequel to this game yet. Time and time again, at every Nintendo Direct, every E3, I always think, what if they revealed a new Kid Icarus? I would be fine if they made an HD remake of Uprising. But along with a few other franchises, Nintendo likes to pretend Kid Icarus doesn't even exist anymore. Look at the Switch's avatar image selection. You get all these Nintendo franchises, but no F-Zero, no Earthbound, and no Kid Icarus. Like, I would be fine if they didn't want to or see any profit in making games for these franchises anymore, but it maddens me that they completely ignore them. But anyways, I'm getting off track here. What I'm here to talk about today is what I would want as the perfect sequel to Kid Icarus Uprising. The console. Alright, so I think it's pretty obvious that the console of choice for a sequel should be the Nintendo Switch.
Nintendo Switch?!
I know as of now Nintendo is still making games for the 3DS, but come on, the 3DS has been around for ages now. I think it's time to move on. If it's a matter of staying loyal to portable systems, like how the main Pokemon games are or how the past two Kid Icarus games have been, well, guess what? The Switch is portable too. Plus, according to Nintendo's E3 presentation, a core Pokemon title is coming to the Switch in the next few years, so there's really no excuse for Kid Icarus to stay on the 3DS. Unless Nintendo comes out with a 4DS, but I mean, come on, they wouldn't make another DS system, would they? The controls and the gameplay. Although I do want a sequel to be on the Switch, there are some foreseeable problems that arise with it being on a console like this. The main one being is that there isn't a second screen. This means no touchscreen controls and no character portraits. This is a huge problem for me because 1, the stylus to freely move your reticle and control the camera around was totally fine, and 2, the character portraits are essential to the structure of the story as many of the characters you never even met in person, or if you did, it wasn't until much later on. Without the character portraits on the bottom screen, you'll have no idea what the characters even look like if they continue with the same story format as before. I think the gameplay would have to be vastly reworked for this, and I really don't want it to just turn into a standard third-person shooter, but I feel as though Splatoon's hybrid of gyro and analog controls could potentially work if tweaked a bit. Now that we're using a second stick to aim, this opens up all the other buttons on the Switch controller to also use for commands, unlike the 3DS where you literally had one context-sensitive button for everything. So in terms of the button mapping, here's how I think it should be laid out. Left analog stick to move. You can still tap to run and dodge like previously, or maybe you could click the stick in to dodge or something. Right analog stick would obviously turn the camera like in Splatoon, but gyro controls would be there to move your reticle more precisely. You could also click the right analog in to zoom in maybe, like with certain weapons like say the staff or certain blades. I think being able to freely jump again would also be cool, so maybe have X for that. Give the ability to scroll through your powers still an option to do on the D-pad just like before, but also give the option to hotkey Y, B, and A to specific powers to use on a shorter notice. Your right trigger would obviously be your shoot button, right bumper melee, left trigger could be a weapon-specific ability, more on that later, and the left bumper could be used as an item like a grenade or something. But with so many more buttons now, I think each weapon class should control differently. For example, the blade would use the right trigger to shoot normally, and then your right bumper would start a short chain of melee attacks. Oh, and another thing I think it would be cool is to have more emphasis on melee attacks for certain weapons, and have them do a string of combos, kind of like some kind of Kingdom Hearts. Of course, each weapon would have a different length melee combo based on what it is. So, for example, the Orbitars would probably have a really short melee combo, while the claws would have the longest. As I mentioned before, the left trigger should be a weapon-specific ability, so maybe with the bow, for example, the left trigger would split the bow in half and allow you to have better and longer melee combos while sacrificing the ability to shoot until the button is pressed again. Or another would be with the club, it could swing around really fast like Link's spin attack and do massive damage, but the ability drains all of Pit's stamina and you have to wait for it to recharge again. I could go on about this forever, but I think you get the point. Going back to the whole character portrait thing, I think Nintendo could do this one of two ways. The first way being how they handled it in the Palutena's Guidance Easter egg of Smash Wii U, which could work if they made the characters' portraits smaller and more to the side to not block the gameplay too bad, or they could do it similar to Star Fox where a little box appears with the character's face in it. While it would be less distracting, I think the Star Fox method wouldn't work quite as well, only because of how restricting it is for character expression and seems a bit too mechanical. The whole deal with the dialogue in Uprising was to make it feel like a soldier's intercom, while giving it this weird, mystical, telepathic vibe. It was basically a Greek mythological Skype. I really liked the fact that anyone in range could just god hack their way into the telepathic call. The story. Honestly, I don't care what the setting is, as long as it still has the same lighthearted but still serious at times tone the first game had, and as long as all of the same voice actors return. I don't remember exactly who said this, but I remember reading somewhere that you should always make the characters before the setting they're in. If you make good characters, you can put them in any situation. The only main plot point that I think should be brought up is the fact that, according to Smash Bros., Patu is working with the forces of nature as Viridi's angel. I think that's pretty cool, though I definitely don't see Viridi or Patu being the main villain of the game, maybe rivals at worst, although I really don't want to see Hades being revived, since the whole entire beginning plot of Uprising was that Medusa was revived. I just think the whole resurrection plot would be a bit stale at this point. This may or may not work, but it would be kind of interesting to have some of the villains be gods from other mythologies, sort of like how Sony is doing with the new God of War. The multiplayer. Whenever I revisit Uprising, I hardly ever play the multiplayer. To me, it felt a bit too hectic and a bit unfair with no matchmaking system, since players can just bring in whatever powers and weapons they wanted to. I think in the new multiplayer they should get rid of being able to bring in your own powers, but still let you choose one of your own weapons, just to keep things balanced and less hectic. Also, it'd be nice to customize your multiplayer character's armor outside of the color of your Mii, kinda like how Halo does it. I think the stages are mostly fine, maybe just make them a little bigger and have less restrictive corridors, although a greater variety of stages would also be good. I would also like to see more game modes implemented, like one-on-one, capture the flag, king of the hill, maybe an elimination deathmatch style game mode. I think on certain stages there should be vehicles like exotanks and stuff for players to control if they found them, also kinda like in Halo, and maybe even a glowing feather that would spawn in occasionally that would grant whoever grabbed it first the ability to freely fly around for a few minutes and have their shots enhanced in power, just like in the flight stages. That way, if it was a free-for-all, all the players would have to work together to take down this one guy, and if they shot his wings enough while he was still in the air, they would like burn up and he'd fall, making an instant kill or something, just, you know, to keep it balanced. Other than the versus mode online, I would also like to see a co-op game mode that would be both online and local multiplayer. It could be something like Call of Duty Zombies, where you and the other players are set in this huge arena and you have to fight wave after wave of enemies, or maybe you're dropped into some Zelda-esque labyrinth where you have to work together and escape while also having to fight off enemies, or even the Minotaur himself, who would have a buttload of health and you're almost just better off running away unless you all work together. Like, that would be so cool! But anyways, those are my thoughts on what Nintendo could do for the next Kid Icarus game. Here's hoping we don't have to wait another 25 years for that sequel. This has been Starseeker Nomad, and I'll see you later.